Welcome, good thinkers. Welcome to Good Thinking Live. We're back this Monday. Most Mondays we're here, right here on LinkedIn Live at 9 a.m. Pacific time here in the northwest corner of the United States and 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time everywhere else. Welcome, good thinkers, to the show. Let us know who's here. Let us know and where you're from. We're going to have a lot of fun participation. And I'm going to also reach out to you all and ask your opinion on a very exciting thing that we are going to be launching sometime next month, maybe the first week in December, trying to figure out what's best for everyone. All right. Welcome, everyone here. Hello. Welcome, good thinker. Yes. First one on the show. Welcome. All right. Here we go. When you think of intellectual courage, maybe you've thought about it a lot, maybe you haven't thought about it at all, but after today, I think you will. When you think about intellectual courage, what comes to mind? What comes to mind? Just as you're thinking, what kinds of things come to mind? What does it mean to you? And then the next question is, who comes to mind? When you think of someone who is intellectually courageous, who comes to mind? And probably some of that is predicated on what you think it means or what you think it might mean. And then you think, okay, people that I think of, the first person that comes to mind is Galileo, someone who went against prevailing beliefs. And sometimes it's hard to kind of define who has intellectual courage and who's just a conspiracy theorist, right? But Galileo or Sojourner Truth, these people both had the intellectual courage to speak out against prevailing beliefs. There's another way of thinking about it, which is people who went against their own initial prevailing belief to fight against a belief that they thought that they once had that they realize now is not a good idea, not a good belief, not supported. And those are people like Hans and Sophie Scholl, who had the intellectual courage to publicly question the Third Reich after updating their own thinking. And I'm going to say hi to a few more people that have just come on the show. So welcome, Barkley from DC, and Alexandra, welcome. And okay, good. So Abdurrachid says, speak up your thoughts. Absolutely. There's no sound. Is anyone not getting sound? I don't know. Is there anyone else that has no sound? Click on the sound icon. Okay, so maybe just click on that. I'm just hoping from my end, it would not be surprising if from my end there was a little technical glitch, but check. I think we're good here. So that is, we should be all good. After reading Michael Lewis's book, so Michael Lewis, who wrote Moneyball and some of these other best-selling books, wrote a book called Premonition that revealed what happened in the early days of COVID, particularly in the United States and the scientific community here. All right. So after reading Michael Lewis's book Premonition, I feel like I could also identify Charity Dean, who was a public health doctor in California, and she was one of the first who saw the real danger of the virus before the rest of the country did, and she sounded the alarm in spite of being massively dismissed. And then there's a whole slew of characters like this group of 7 doctors who call themselves the Wolverines, who are positioned in various places in the United States government, but they come together when there is a threat of a disease outbreak. And these are some of the people that I think I would think of when I think about intellectual courage, the courage to not to just pull out some crazy conspiratorial thing and, say, okay, everyone believes this, I'm going to go this way. Not to be a contrarian, but to use actual research and to use good thinking and critical thinking to arrive at a belief and be willing to challenge your own prevailing beliefs, not just the prevailing beliefs of others. So and I'll get more into that definition. I'm going to say hi to some people. Good morning, Alan from San Jose. And so anyway, sometimes still no sound. Oh man, Alexandra, maybe, I don't know, maybe try to start and restart. I don't know. It sounds like people are getting sound. There may be some kind of bug. I don't know, but hopefully you'll be able to tune in because it's going to be fun. All right, let's unpack intellectual courage. All right. Intellectual courage is being aware of the need to and brave enough to act on, but being aware of the need to face and fairly address ideas, beliefs, and viewpoints that give you strong negative emotions and perhaps has caused you to ignore or unfairly dismiss without being fair-minded and giving reasonable research and consideration because it just seems so whatever. Now, again, this doesn't mean every stupid idea you have to consider, but if you dismiss ideas because they are not part of your prevailing beliefs or not part of the prevailing belief of others, usually that is a sign that you might need to kind of rustle up some more intellectual courage. Because to determine for yourself what makes sense, you can't passively and uncritically accept what you've learned. You have to be fair-minded in looking for ways to disconfirm your beliefs, and intellectual courage is required because the penalties for nonconformity can be severe. The penalties for nonconformity can be severe. So if you are, and all of your like-minded friends, you look at other people and say, you need to have the intellectual courage to agree with us. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about yourself, having your own intellectual courage to work on potentially and fair-mindedly working to find ways to disconfirm your beliefs so that if they are in disconfirming them, you can understand the arguments against them, then you're entitled to and you've earned the right to hold certain beliefs a little more strongly. So it's a weird thing, but it is required for intellectual courage. Okay, anyone have an idea about what intellectual courage means to you? And then specifically, because it's different, each culture is slightly different. So in your culture, here's the question. In your culture, from wherever you come from, what is preferred? Independent thinking or conventional mindedness? Independent mindedness or conventional mindedness? And in the United States, there's this tendency to say, oh, it's always better to be independent minded. But to really answer the question fairly is to think about when that isn't true and when it's good that it's not true. So in your culture, tell me what you think. Is your culture more conventional minded? Does it reward, regardless of what you do, does it reward conventional mindedness or independent mindedness? All right, so Alan says, okay, Michael Schellenberger, a longtime progressive out of Berkeley, California, changed his mind on nuclear power and has just released a book, San Francisco. I've actually heard the title. I haven't read the book. Changing his mind on progressive policies in cities. He's now being attacked by his contemporaries. Intellectual courage extraordinaire. Absolutely. And whether that means that you have to believe that everything he says is true, like you don't have to just adopt, but to have the intellectual courage to challenge that's a perfect example. Now, just because someone is courageous doesn't mean that they're right. Correct? Because maybe he'll then learn and create more nuance in his thinking. But that's a perfect example of someone who has explored disconfirming evidence that challenges beliefs that he previously held. What do you prefer? So if your culture prefers independent mindedness, I would argue that a lot of cultures support conventional mindedness, but tout independent mindedness. Like, there's more of a penalty for being independent minded than conventional minded. And it's easy to look at other people and think that they're the ones that are conventional minded and we're not. But what do you prefer? Independent mindedness or conventional mindedness? All right. So we've got a question. What are the aspects that intellectual courage fulfill for critical thinking? Excellent. Excellent. That's a really good question, because if the goal of critical thinking is the journey of getting closer to the truth, then you have to be willing to constantly seek evidence to upgrade your thinking and never finally land on, okay, now I know and my journey is over. Critical thinking is to understand what can be relied on to get you closer to the truth, what's reliable, relevant, valid evidence, RRV. So if you don't have the intellectual courage to update your thinking, then you are probably not, you can't call yourself a critical thinker. Now, does it mean that when you update your thinking, you've landed on the right truth? No, you might go back, but the point of having intellectual courage is to face the beliefs that just feel not right to you, face the ideas and really examine them with a critical lens. That's kind of the whole idea behind critical thinking. One challenge is that we are often mistaken about where we fall on the spectrum from conventional to independent mindedness. Like in the United States, we don't like to think of conventional minded people don't like to think of themselves as conventional minded. It genuinely feels like we make up our own minds about everything. And it's just a coincidence that our beliefs are identical to our peers. Now, if you talk about, I want to be in a room of like-minded people, you might think we are all independent-minded people. But by definition, that could be that you might consider challenging that assumption. So it's very hard to know whether we fall, where we fall on that continuum. Okay, very good book on critical. Think Again by Adam Grant. Yeah, good new book, Think Again by Adam Grant. Agree. Just be willing to update your beliefs. And we're going to talk about how to do that because it's easier said than done. By the time we reach adulthood, most of us don't think about independent mindedness. We think about it for our children. We think about it maybe in our elementary school, except for to the extent we suppress it. We don't get feedback about how independent minded we are, because if we do say something that bucks convention, the penalties are pretty severe. So intellectual courage is a vital ingredient of critical thinking. Intellectual, because it involves thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. And courage, because, and this is borrowing from Aristotle, which I love this. Let me know what you think about this one. Courage, because it's a virtue that's midway between cowardice and recklessness. I love that. What do you think about that? Could you consider courage a virtue somewhere between cowardice and recklessness? That's Aristotle. All right, so question for you. Ready? Now really answer this in the chat. There's going to be rubber chickens. All right, where do you get your ideas? Where do they come from? Where do your ideas come from? Or where have your ideas come from if you're haven't updated them or upgraded them in recent years? Where have your ideas come from? So, okay, so we consider prevailing ideas as a critical thinking killer. No, not a critical thinking killer. I don't think we can consider prevailing ideas as a critical thinking killer, because some prevailing ideas might be brilliant. It's not about taking every prevailing idea and just dismissing it. It's about something else that we'll get to in just a few minutes. A little trick you can do. It's like a puzzle. Okay, I'll give you the answer. It's like a puzzle. You don't know which pieces fit. So if you're looking at things now, ideas as these ideas are never going to change. We have landed on the truth in 2021. We are here, nowhere to go. That's kind of like saying, oh, those acid wash jeans I wore in the 90s, those are always going to be in style. Or those ripped up jeans in the knees that I paid so much for to have them already ripped up. I'm never going to look back on that and think, what was I thinking? This is going to be the style from here until the day I die. Probably not. Probably not. Same with ideas. All right. Same with some of the trends and these beliefs that you have to think this way. You have to do things that way. The key is to look into the jigsaw puzzle and figure out what pieces might not fit in a few years, like my jeans that don't fit after COVID. But I digress. Okay, so we said, all right, so where do you get ideas? Conversations, books, and people. Conversations, books, and people. Fantastic. 3 great ways to get ideas. That's why I love when people share their book ideas. All right, so how do you know if you have intellectual courage? All right, here are 3 ways that you can look for. And this we're borrowing from our new course, our new LinkedIn Learning course called Developing a Critical Thinking Mindset. So we dive deeper into this particular thing, and we're going to expand upon some of that stuff right here today. But if you want to get an idea of, do I have a critical thinking mindset and what does that mean? check out the course on LinkedIn Learning, Developing a Critical Thinking Mindset. All right. Okay, so here's what to look out for in yourself. Now, be sure that you're not looking out for other people, pointing to them saying you don't have intellectual courage. This is about yourself. All right. So number one, a willingness to critically analyze your own strongly held beliefs and conclusions. Critically analyze your own, not looking at others and saying you're doing it wrong, looking at myself and saying, am I doing it wrong? And a willingness to respectfully speak up for what you believe to be true, even if it's popular. And this is a really challenging one, because if you speak up for something that's true and it's so risky to you that you could lose your livelihood or your reputation or whatever, you can see how, especially in this day and age with social media, being intellectually courageous is maybe harder than it's ever been. Because if you speak up against some prevailing wisdom, now, obviously, if you speak up against a prevailing wisdom without the backing, like you think you understand something that is scientifically outside of your, like if you're anti-vaccination, for example, and you read something from some study, but you really don't understand the science behind it, you may not have enough knowledge to know to just rely on this scientist versus that scientist. I mean, the thing about Galileo is some of these people, they're doing their own research. So, that means that if you can't do that research, you need to hold your opposing views a little less loosely, a little less firmly, right? Because it may be outside, like, I don't know quantum physics. I couldn't have a strong opinion on something that required quantum physics to understand. All right. So let's get some more calls. More conversation going. Amir says, from anywhere my knowledge and imagination can go. How do you allow your knowledge? This is great. How do you allow that to just go when it butts up against something that feels uncomfortable or something that's antithetical to your beliefs? All right. I get my ideas from courses, books, interesting discussions, good thinkers. Yes. That's why I love it here, because every week we can join together with other good thinkers where no question is dangerous, as long as it comes from a point of curiosity. All right. And the third thing is a willingness to fairly face and assess ideas and beliefs and viewpoints that you disagree with. And fairly face and assess doesn't mean just necessarily being a contrarian. It doesn't necessarily fairly face and assess. So if it's fair to say, I don't know, because I literally don't know enough about the underlying science or the underlying whatever, that's okay too. Being able to say, I don't know. Here's my question to you. What does it feel like to say, I don't know? Does it feel inaccurate? Like, I do know. Does it feel scary? Like, I don't want to look like an idiot? Or does it feel liberating? Well, let me tell you, as much as I want to say it feels liberating, sometimes it feels like it's inaccurate because I know. And then I have to kind of step back, because the worst way it can feel scary and it can feel liberating. But if it feels inaccurate to say, I don't know, that's a clue that you need to reassess that particular feeling, because it is standing in the way of your intellectual courage. We don't know. All right. So we've got biggest idea generator is curiosity. Agreed. Totally rubber chicken, agree. Biggest idea generator is curiosity. And sometimes you can't wait for curiosity to happen. You have to make it happen. How can I get curious? And these things are easy, right? No, they're very hard. That's why it's called courage and takes lifelong practice. So people should give intellectual courage more thought. Myself too. I scroll through LinkedIn. And I think all these things where people are telling you what to do, telling you what leadership needs, telling you what this means, telling you how you should say this and how you should say that. And I think to myself, in the jigsaw puzzle of life, how many of these things are going to be like acid wash jeans in 10 years? I'm trying to guess. I'm trying to see into the future and fairly assess some of these prevailing truths, some of the things that people who I feel are like-minded. How do I upgrade my own thinking? All right. It feels liberating because I embrace my ignorance, at the same time prepare myself to receive new things. Okay, rubber chicken. If that is true, you are. Yay. Okay. Fairly face and assess. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Fairly face and assess. That's really it. Be fair to your own thinking. Don't be so precious and protective that what you know. Because who knows the Socrates quote? Socrates, not Socrates. Who knows the Socrates quote? All right. Do you want to do, here's a question. Do you want to do the kind of work, like from today into the rest of your life? Do you want to do the kind of work that rewards conventional thinking, which is totally fine because there's a lot of great conventional thinking that you can get rewards for? Or do you want to do the kind of work that rewards independent mindedness? And part of it is when you go into a work situation and there's a disconnect because you haven't assessed that. Like if you're a middle manager doing a great job and you're a leader and you love your team and you've got processes that you can rely on, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. You can be in a career that rewards that kind of thinking. But if you are just constantly butting up against that and trying to bring your ideas and you may not be the kind of person where you would be best suited for a space that rewards conventional mindedness so those are some of the things that you need to think about. All right. Relentlessly curious. Yes. Yes. Me too. To the point where I'm sometimes annoying. All right. So let's get to it. How can we embrace intellectual courage? Let's get down to some really specific ways that we can do it before we have to head off for our week of good thinking. All right. So number one, actively find one opportunity at least once a month to listen to someone you disagree with. Just actively find it. That should not be hard. If you have to do it on YouTube to listen, fine. But if you can find someone in person, if it's safe with COVID, then better still. Actively, now not someone who maybe has some crazy ideas that are conspiratorial, ill-founded, whatever. And let me point something out. There is a difference in independent mindedness. For example, if someone thinks that the earth is flat, but they're in no position to assess the science, they could just hear from other people, that kind of unconventional thinking is really not the same as someone who challenges some social construct, because the hard science, which we find things are wrong all the time, should not that you're not assessing whether something's true or not, like climate change, in the same way, or vaccine efficacy, in the same way you're going to be assessing some social construct. There are different ways of assessing it. So if you apply one to the other, then you could, like if a historian has talked for years about, Galileo and has written about Galileo, that doesn't give you an idea into what Galileo really was thinking. You have no access to that information. You have speculation. That's different than someone who has actually studied, astrophysicists who have studied the shape of the planet. So those are kind of different. You can't use one for the other, if that makes sense. All right. So find one opportunity a month to discuss with someone that you strongly disagree with, not to convince them, not to persuade them, to understand, and to be open to changing your mind. That's the other thing, to be open to changing your mind. All right, so we're going to bring some comments in, then we'll get to the last few ways of increasing your intellectual courage or becoming intellectually courageous. All right, let's see. So Alan says, curiosity is incredibly important. My 13-year-old niece hammers me with questions on investing. So we opened an investment account for her. So now she has to critically evaluate stocks and in ETFs. A future Warren Buffett. Woohoo! Good for her. All right, so we've said, why can't we have both at the same job? I believe there can be room for both. Yes, absolutely. There is room for conventional mindedness or independent mindedness. And every company, there should be, ideally. The question is just to think about for yourself, do you want to be in a space where you are mostly rewarded for conventional mindedness or independent mindedness? Because there are some roles where the rewards are greater for conventional mindedness and vice versa. So just thinking about that, and you can have both. absolutely can have both. That's a great question and clarification. Thank you. All right, next thing. Write down one of your strongly held beliefs. Write it down and make sure you can support it with evidence that you truly understand and that you can clearly explain to someone else, not by quoting or repeating what someone else has said. You truly understand it, not by saying, oh, the sociologist blah, blah, blah has said that. Even research, you see research and you say, oh, well, 30% of this and this, to really understand how was that research conducted. Because if you're going around now saying and repeating and making a career about telling people about this, you better understand on a deeper level. So just a practice of taking one of your strongly held beliefs and doing that exercise. You don't have to tell anyone. It's your own little thing. So sometimes being courageous has to start privately before you can go out publicly, right? All right. The next one, here's another way, is this is a weird one. For those of you how many of you are news junkies? Like you get up in the morning, you have to see what all the different news sources say, and you have to know all this stuff. Well, sometimes to become more independently minded means becoming less aware of what conventional beliefs are. I know it's hard to be conformist if you don't know what you're supposed to conform to. So that's a weird one. How many of you who are addicted to news, could just become a little less aware of what the popular conforming, not to walk around clueless, but so that you could use that time to develop some deeper knowledge, some independent mindedness? Can you steal a little bit away from all of the prevailing wisdom, conforming ideas? You say, I didn't even know that song was popular. I didn't even know that trend was popular. But here's what I know because I took time away from that news junkie behavior. I don't know. Can you do it? How do you go into a conversation and everyone's talking about some political thing and you don't know anything about it? Do you look like an idiot? Yes, because this is why it's intellectual courage. It's not just being intellectual. It's being intellectually courageous, which might mean knowing a little bit less about what's popular, what's trendy, so that you can then not have it influence your independent mindedness. Again, there's a balance. All right. So Alan says, right or wrong, I apply the scientific method to all decisions I make. Thus, I have to do my own research and analysis. Yeah, absolutely. And you apply that and other things too, other decision-making models too. All right. The next thing is, it does matter who you surround yourself with. If you're surrounded by conventional-minded people, it will constrain the ideas that you can safely, and I meaning feel comfortable and maybe needing a little too much courage to express. And that in turn will influence the ideas you have. But if you surround yourself with some independent-minded people, you'll have the opposite experience. You'll hear other people say surprising things, and those things will encourage you to think more. So look around in your friendship group, look around in your groups of people with whom you spend time. Do you have any independent-minded people who surprise you, who share different viewpoints and bring different perspectives? Or are you needing to hang around with like-minded people because you just can't take the idiots, just can't take them? Which one? So the people that you surround yourself with will affect the degree to which you can even have the independent mindedness to even consider being intellectually courageous. All right. Also, cultivate an attitude of skepticism, not cynicism, not a negative patina for every idea. Sometimes I feel like I might sound like a cynic because I'm like, oh, that idea. I try, not perfect, I try to bring skepticism. Sometimes it turns into cynicism. So that balance is difficult. But cultivate an attitude of skepticism. When you hear someone say something, stop and ask yourself, is that true? Don't say it out loud. I'm not suggesting that everyone you talk to, you question. Sometimes I might do that too much, but admittedly, but in your mind, is that true? And how could that not be true? And how could that look 10 years from now, where we know more about this topic for whatever reason, technology, etc. So cultivating this idea of skepticism. All right. One of the problems is there's a problem with novelty, because when you tell people something they didn't know, they don't always thank you for it. Like, how often does someone tell you something you know, and you say, thank you, I did not know that, and that goes against everything I stand for? Not very common. Or how often do you even admit that you didn't know that? Because we're supposed to know everything with all this deluge of information. Oh, I knew that. I knew that. So the problem with novelty is that people don't always thank you for sharing novel ideas. So sometimes the reason that people don't know something is because they don't want to know it. And usually that is because it contradicts some cherished belief. So if you find yourself attacking someone who brings some bit of knowledge, you can say in your mind, is that true? You don't have to, but if you don't even take the time to say this, you just attack it because it goes against, then you're not going to have what it takes to be intellectually courageous. You need humility to measure novelty, because acknowledging the novelty of an idea means acknowledging your previous ignorance of it. All right. And confidence and humility are often seen as opposites, but really confidence helps you be humble. Like if you have the confidence that you can courage to face ideas that you might not have known, it's amazing what that can do for every aspect of your life. So treat intellectual courage like a puzzle. You know that some of the accepted ideas, just like acid wash jeans or shoulder pads, how many of you wore shoulder pads back in the day? I'm dating myself. You know that some of the accepted ideas will turn out to be wrong. Some of them will be brought back as right, or some element of right, or upgraded right. But see if you can guess which ideas, which prevailing beliefs that you have. It's easy to see what other people have and say, oh, they're wrong about this. Which prevailing beliefs do you have now that might turn out to be wrong? Can you guess? Because how much of what you know should more accurately be characterized by what you think? Oh, I know that. How much of what you know is really what you think? As Viktor Frankl said, between every stimulus and every response is a space. So make that space curiosity. Not being afraid of being wrong is super powerful. And practice saying, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. See how powerful it can be. Thanks. Oh, for those of you who stayed here till the bitter end, we're going to be doing a very cool thing on good thinking. We're going to take one 90-minute slot to do a workshop sprint going deep on a practical application of how you can use this critical thinking to make important decisions. And it's going to be kind of a workshop-y thing. So let me know in the comments whether you're here live or not. If you stay to the bitter end, let me know if this is something that I'm going to offer it to the good thinkers. The regular good thinkers on the show are going to get first slot because it's going to be a limited number of people that can do it. But we're going to be doing it. It's going to be about 90 minutes, sometime in November, early December. So going to be very, very, very fun. If you want to be prepared for that, go ahead and check out the trifecta, the 3 LinkedIn learning courses on critical thinking that we have: critical thinking for better judgment decision-making, developing a critical thinking mindset, and critical thinking more effective communication. And you'll have the foundation. It's not required that you have these courses under your belt to take the workshop, but it's highly suggested. Anyway, tune in. See you next Monday right here on LinkedIn, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and on YouTube, where you can go, Becky Saltzman, and subscribe and hit that bell button if you want notifications for when we go live. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will give more information about this workshop in next Monday. We'll have all the details next Monday on good thinking. Thanks for being here. Have a great week.